This episode has very sensitive topics, is for mature audiences only, and contains depictions of various forms of trauma. Viewer discretion advised.
There were many times where cops would actually bring me to a cafe and be like, you're not allowed to leave until you get food in your belly. You're either going into jail or you're dying. To go straight from this sexually charged environment in a cult to a fully sexually charged environment in clubs where girls were expected to wear tiny skirts and dresses and be available, where I thought I was in control, but really it's just a full numbing technique and I'm just totally in that trauma cycle. He had actually contacted me a few months before this happened and he was asking me where my parents were. And I was like, no, I'm not telling you where my parents are. And I have a feeling that you're going to harm them. I don't want that on me. And something I could tell had switched. It just felt like he was really struggling. And then I received some video footage privately about the video that is on YouTube about him, why he's going to commit the suicide with Angela Smith, what he's going to do, how he's trying to get to his mother, and he's going to do everything he can. That changed everything for me and for my family because there was no more hiding at that point. That changed everything for everyone. I was dating someone at the time and he was like, what is going on? Like, I was on TV and I saw your family. And he had met my parents too. And I just was like, just catatonic. I couldn't even talk about it. When I was talking to therapists, like, I grew up in a cult and then I was a child bride and then like my mother was a leader and she wrote this book about child abuse and they were just like, not every therapist can deal with that.
Hey, my name is Shalisa Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening through the podcast apps and you want to see our faces, go to our YouTube at Cults to Consciousness. We absolutely love it when you can interact with the post. It helps our channel. It helps others see these messages and get to more people, so more people can become aware and compassionate of people leaving these groups. So today's guest, we just finished up an episode, which you don't necessarily need to pause this and go back and watch the first one. If you want to start here, that's fine. You can go back and get context, but we will be filling you in. You can start here if you'd like. We are talking about the Children of God. For those who aren't familiar, oh man, it's a lot. I'm taking deep breaths because the last episode we got into some graphic detail of CSA talking about how the leader of the cult, David Berg, essentially thought that children should be sexually liberated from infancy. And we are talking to a guest who was in his inner circle given to him as a child bride at 3 years old. We detailed her experiences from her childhood in the Philippines, Japan, Brazil, and now Mexico. Being in this cult, this isolated group, we are picking up where she is 16. The rules had changed once David Berg had passed on. She's 16 years old, and now she is essentially deemed free game for people to be able to have sex with her. So we're going to talk about what it was like with her deciding to plot her escape, get out of this group. In this episode, we will be talking about finding normalcy and acclimating into the real world. She'd been isolated into these cults for so many years, obviously her entire life. We are going to be getting into what that was like for her. Thank you so much for joining us again, Serena Kelley.
Hi. Thank you again for having me.
Yes, I was like, how do I do the best recap possible? And I'm still reeling from the first episode. My goodness, I forget. I do these episodes all the time, of course, and I hear traumatic stories, but when it hits so close to home, for me, it's like a little extra that I don't think I prepared myself for. But everything that you divulge, I'm so grateful to you for sharing. And we talked about the self-care that needs to happen after these episodes for both of us.
Yes.
I think it's important to mention what you did right off camera when we ended the first episode about how it took a while for you to be able to actually share your story.
Yes, absolutely. Backtracking just a bit, when I left the compound, I had to lie about who I was. I was married here, who was featured in all of the cult publications and the series Life with Grandpa, essentially grew up as a celebrity inside the Children of God cult. And when I left the inner circle of Berg, I was told to lie about who I was. So I was basically lying about my identity from the age of 6 to the age of about 12 when Berg died. And then all of a sudden, I was free game and I was able to talk about my life. And everybody knew who I was, which was fine. But it also came with its own set of problems of almost split personality disorder. Who was I Is it okay to lie? Do I still lie? I was so brainwashed and programmed to lie. It was very hard for me to actually even tell the truth who I was to people inside the cult, and subsequently when I left the cult, to even tell anyone that I grew up in a cult. Now, mind you, I don't lead with this with any new friend group or anyone I'm trying to connect with. Like, I grew up in a cult. Nice to meet you. I'm Serena. And I know some people who do, and good for them. But that's just not really it. My story is very traumatic, and I have to trust people with my story, but I also have to trust myself giving my story to others, because I don't know what other people have been through either. And I don't want to trigger someone, and I don't want to traumatize someone unnecessarily. Essentially, what I started doing when I left the cult was just lying about who I was. I told people I was half Brazilian, half American, and raised in Brazil. My parents were in the military. My parents were with the Red Cross. So I used that story with the Red Cross and my father, because he actually ended up working with the Red Cross. So later on, I was like, ooh, good story to use. So I told everyone every single story I could think of that would make sense, that would be just enough for people to be like, oh, okay, that's weird. Like or like very easy, military brat. Okay, and moves on with their life, which was so not the truth and the complete opposite of a military brat. The whole reason why I started going on my healing journey after I left the cult was because I just wanted to talk about my story without bursting into tears. That was it. Because people would start asking me, who's your parents? I started dating, and they'd be like, I want to meet your parents. And I was like, no. And they said, why? And I'd be like, cause they're missionaries. And I couldn't. Anything to do with my family, I would cry. I couldn't handle like just the thought. So all I wanted to be able to do was tell my story to other people truthfully without bursting into tears. And that's how the entire healing journey began.
Yeah, and you told me this because when we finished, I was like, you're amazing. That was fantastic. You're such a great storyteller. And you're like, well, took a minute to get here, which is important for people to know also, because we do have people who submit to be on the show, and it's a very real thing to come forward and tell your story publicly. And I think it's important for people to understand that it's really difficult, and sometimes it takes telling it to many people, even a therapist, before you're able to come on and tell a story. Just that kind of behind the scenes, behind the curtain scenario, I want people to understand. It's not just you leave a cult and then you're like, oh, I'm ready to share, for those who haven't been in those scenarios before. Let's get back to where we were in the story. So you just turned 16, you decided to leave a cult compound, and you go to one in Mexico, or a different one in Mexico, where you can be more acclimated with the Mexican culture. And you're starting to realize or you knew already, but you're realizing you need to plan your escape because you knew you didn't want to be there.
Yeah, there's a key point that I need to backtrack with, which people often wonder, how did I get from not knowing any other life, raised in a cult, to wanting to escape, to wanting to leave, and to knowing things are not right? And there were a lot of things that we talked about, like the hierarchy and the fancy houses versus the poverty. But the main thing that happened was when my mom came back and got demoted, and she was in Rio in our compound. She gave like a Sarah Davidito fancy leadership speech, and she recited the story of Abraham and Isaac, and how Abraham put Isaac on the altar because God wanted a sacrifice to prove his loyalty to him. My mom then pointed me out in the crowd, and she was like, Serena is like my Isaac, because I gave up Serena and being with Serena to lead the family in South America and for God, and because God had a higher calling for me. And immediately I just was like, that doesn't make sense, because giving me up, to go and live in a different house where there's a waterfall and a personal maid is not the same as killing your child.
Yeah.
So I asked her in public, so does that mean if I'm Isaac, in this story, if God asked you to sacrifice me, like to kill me, would you do it? And she said, well, if that's what God wanted and he asked me, then yes. I was 12 or 13. It was very shortly after Berg died, and things were really chaotic. And when she said that, something in me switched, and I immediately knew I'm not safe in the cult. Like, of course we knew subconsciously we were not safe, but it's hard to articulate that as a child. It's hard to understand this is not safe, and this is what it means to not be safe. I just thought Running away from men who were trying to grope me and put their fingers inside me was just another part of life. I didn't know that was sexual abuse. I didn't know I wasn't safe. And then, of course, living in Brazil and Rio, where it's an extremely dangerous place, especially for young children, because children were getting kidnapped and trafficked all the time. So I wasn't safe begging in the streets because people would often try to grab you and throw you in their cars or kidnap you.
Oh my gosh.
That I'm also not safe inside the cult. And I realized I wasn't safe anywhere, including my mother, who should have been the one person where I was safe with. If it doesn't matter if, you're in a cult, I should have been safe with my mother. Any child should be safe with their mother.
Yeah.
Something switched in me that day. And from that day on, I was like, I looked at my mother as this stranger, as this woman that I fully understood, like the beatings that she would give me. My mother was very violent. She would throw me on the ground and kick me, hit me in the head. She would hit us with books. She was an extremely violent woman. And from that moment on, I realized I'm not safe with her. I'm not safe in this group. I'm not safe outside of the group. So what do I do? Where do I go? And that's what kickstarted my entire plan at that age of like, this is, I say bullshit now, but like in my mind, this is not right. So what is right? Where do I go? And that's how it all started. So now back into Mexico when I'm 16, knowing that the rules do not apply. And I knew as soon as I turned 16, the adult men would be trying to have sex with me. I knew I needed to leave the cult compound where my mother was because she was going to give them to me, just like she gave me to Berg when I was 3. And I needed to go somewhere else in the cult where either I felt safe or I felt that I had more control over myself and my body. So that's what I did, and used the whole excuse of I need to learn Spanish. I want to witness for Jesus and everything. So I went to Morelia, where the leaders of Mexico lived, and I stayed in their houses. That's when I completely started rebelling, when I cut my hair and started wearing really baggy clothes. Both things were very frowned upon. They weren't shunned. They weren't, not allowed, but they were like, oh, she's just a bad apple and she's not full of the spirit of the Lord. The devil might have her. You were already shunned if you look like that, but cutting my hair and wearing loose and baggy clothing made me look more like a boy. I was also very tall and very skinny, and I didn't look like a typical curvaceous Latina. So I was able to hide my sexuality as a feminine woman coming into her own femininity, 16, 17 years old, by having short hair and wearing baggy clothing, hanging out with the boys, being like loud and like super boisterous, rebelling against everything that I knew was expected of me as a woman. So that's kind of how I started changing a little by little and testing the waters to see how far I could get in rebelling, knowing that I was married here, that I was constantly being taken into rooms privately and told to lead by example, and I was being a bad apple and always threatening to send me back to my mom because I was becoming too much of a handful. I started hanging out with the naughty girls who also had short hair, the other kids who were sneaking out and doing boings and smoking or having friends outside of the cult, like, woo, terrible. I started slowly creeping out of like the married dear persona into the married dear bad girl vibe. And that went over real well, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Right. So for those who aren't familiar with Children of God, punishments were a huge thing. Public punishments, spankings, beatings. So it's not like she would just get a slap on the wrist. There are real dangers for rebelling as well. So that was a big decision for her to start pushing the boundaries. One thing that I'm wondering is, you were separated from Berg at a fairly young age. Did anyone ever bring up the marriage again? Like, oh, you're still married to Berg? Or was that just kind of washed away?
It was fully secret. I was not allowed to talk about it. To be quite honest, I don't even know if my mom knew I still had the ring. I carried the ring with me the entire time in my own possession. Somehow I always knew I was going to tell my story and I was going to need some kind of tangible proof. And when I showed that ring later on in life to Mimi Berg and some other women who received the ring, they were like, I have the same ring. We all corroborated on this story, and none of us spoke of it publicly ever. Ever. It was fully in secret because there was never any law or GN or like Berg prophecy or dream saying that you could marry a 3-year-old ever. That was fully swept under the rug. I assume my mom and those who took care of me assumed that I had just lost it. and I never lost it. I always hid it in my stuff and I always carried it. I never wore it. As soon as I left Berg's house, I took it off, but I was made to wear it the whole time I lived with him. That was just fully brushed under the rug and something that I myself brushed under the rug because I couldn't make sense of it at the time either. I was just like, it's a ring from grandpa. It took years to admit that I was a literal child bride. There was no talk of it ever until I was in my 30s.
Let's talk about then that transition. You're rebelling at 16, 17. You did try to escape, and then we'll talk about what happened when that didn't necessarily work out.
I did try one time to leave the cult, and I ended up going to a campground in California. I was kind of by myself, living, taking care of this former husband of a current leader of Mexico in the cult. And I had planned it in this way because I was already known as a bad girl in Mexico. So what they had done in Mexico is sent me back to where my mother was. And my mother was so upset that I had such a bad reputation in the cult now as being this bad girl. She was embarrassed of me. So she said, I'm sending you to the USA. You have to live with your father. My father at the time was living in Dallas. Berg died, so he no longer had his job. So he was also in a different leadership home. And she said, but if you leave WS, World Services, which is what the top leadership secret homes were called, she said, you're never coming back. And I was like, oh, promise? Good. That's the plan.
Yeah.
So she gave me $15 and stuck me on a plane. And I ended up in the USA. But I had met a boy in Mexico that I really liked, and I wanted to go live with him, but his mom was a top leader in Mexico. So what I did instead was ask to be transferred to this halfway house where the ex-husband of this leader had left, and he was living in a campground with 3 of his children. And I would go take care of those children, and I could then kind of work my way back into the good graces of the cult.
Wait, you wanted to work your way back into the cult because of this boy that you liked?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Well, the full plan was to get him and then get him out and us leave together.
Okay.
But
okay.
he was like deep in the Mexico leadership cult, and I was so far shunned like that. The mother hated me. She was like, Serena's terrible. She's full of the devil, you know, like she's hanging out with the rotten apples. Like I was full bad girl status. Everyone knew, like, married her at that. By the time I was 16, 17, I was like full bad girl. Short hair and like, yeah, listening to system music. I was there and ended up just living in a campground, teaching these kids school, and really not doing anything with my life, hanging around a lot of ex-members who were just pretty much smoking weed and doing nothing in their houses. I did not want to go back to the cult, but I knew I didn't have a choice at that point because I knew I wanted to do something with my life. I didn't want to sit around smoking weed for the rest of my life. And I had no education. I didn't know how to drive. I had no bank account. I had nothing that had me existing in the USA besides a passport. I ended up leaving California, going back to Texas where I had some family members there, and then getting my GED to show something that I had some sort of education, and then with that, rejoining the cult to try to get this boy to get him to leave with me. You know, the things we do for love.
The sweetest love story. I know, and I can't wait to hear where it goes from there. But first, I just have to know, what was it like getting a GED in Texas after having minimal to no education within this cult?
It was terrifying. I didn't know what a GED was, but I heard from some other ex-members who had gotten education that there was this thing called a GED that you had to take if you didn't grow up in the US and you weren't in the high school system. This is how they placed you as to like your education level. So I said, okay, I'll just take it. Didn't really study much or anything, just because I didn't know how to study. I didn't know what that meant, like what you sit down and write. I was done with school when I was 14. I could do division and multiplication, and they were like, great, that's all you need, because those are the things you need to work with recipes, because we always had to cook within the home. And so you have to, like, you know, multiply things in the recipes, and great. So the rest of the time you're just begging on the streets and you're taking care of children. So that's all I needed. I didn't know what the word studying meant. So people were like, are you going to study for the GED? I was like, I don't no, like, why? What does that mean? Well, I'll just go in and take it. I barely passed everything except math. I had 30% on math because I didn't know any math. They just taught me multiplication, a little bit of division. I didn't know fractions. I didn't know geometry. And of course, not even to mention algebra or calculus or anything like that. So I had a middle school education in math. I was always a big reader and writer. I always loved this. This was actually something me and Daniela Mestinek Young, we bonded over as children. We loved reading and we loved writing. We were really into books, so we read everything we could get our hands on. And I think that really saved us in later years, especially in our education years. I barely passed those. I think I got the highest in writing and reading, which was about like 60%. And then I don't know how I passed history, but I passed everything 50%. Then 50% was the lowest you could have for a passing score. And then math, I had nothing on there. So basically, I needed to do remedial classes for everything except for reading and writing. I was able to go straight into college classes. So I had that GED. That was just a placement for me. And at the time, I was still really liking this boy. I still really wanted to be with him. We were having like a secret long distance relationship. These are in the days of internet cafes. So I'd have to sneak out to an internet cafe and write him on my little Hotmail address and then sneak him back into the compound. My first attempt at leaving was absolutely unsuccessful. And I tried to tell him, I was like, just come up here. Like, it's your dad too. Like, come live here. And he was just very caught up in cult life. So that didn't work. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I have to go down there and get him.
The thought of you already being out and then you have to just go back. But for love, So how did that work? Did you go back to the same compound or you tried to go to his compound?
I went to his compound because I got such 5-star reviews for taking care of this woman's other children.
It worked.
And it worked, because I'd been taking care of kids since I was 10. I'm now 16 or 17. So like, of course, I'm a professional babysitter, take care of teacher, cook, everything. I did everything. I cooked, I cleaned the trailer, I cleaned the tents. We were in a literal campground living in a trailer in tents. I gave them school. I would walk around. We do our quote unquote witnessing quota, and walk around the campground. So I got raving reviews and like, Serena's really changed. I had to write like a letter to the home to this woman explaining how I want to serve Jesus again. And like, I wrote this whole bullshit letter. Like, I really feel called to go to Mexico and like continue learning Spanish and win souls for the Lord. And, it would be my honor to be in the house. Nothing about her son. It was all about how I could serve Jesus. And it totally worked.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned from the best. I was in the hierarchy. I basically scammed my way through the cult for the rest of the time using their own tactics.
Yeah. So what happens when you get there?
So I get there and it's great. We were together. I knew I had to put like 110% in or I was going to be kicked out. I immediately started being on the singing team, going out butt begging on the streets. We'd go to a place called Subasta where a bunch of people had vegetable stands and we'd go and ask everyone for their old vegetables or their rotten vegetables. I became like one of the top quote unquote witnessers in the home. And there were multiple men in Mexico who would come over and like want to marry me. And we'd be like, no, sorry. And they'd come and give me pearls. Then I was like, well, I really need money, because I'm hungry and like we want to live and we love Jesus. And I became like, they kind of like pimped me out.
Flirty fished
almost. Yeah, flirty fish the people. So, but I knew like as long as I was useful, there was no reason for me to be kicked out. So it was basically just beating them at their own game. Like I got to like such a great personality. Yeah, I have a great personality. Great reputation in that I was in charge of like taking like, Serena, we're all going to go watch a movie. So you take the rest of the kids and they just leave me with the kids. And it worked out great. And the higher up I got and the more trust I got with the adults, the more freedom I had. So I was able to like go out on the weekend, go to like what they call here in Mexico, the tianguis, go to like the fairs and things and walk around. And I had a lot of freedom. And so I was able to learn Spanish. I was able to make friends outside. And that's when I was like, yeah, I'm leaving. Like, everyone is amazing here. I'm making so many friends. People are so nice. Like, we're the ones that have the problem. Like, the more you're exposed to the outside world, the more you realize, like, what an upside down world you're in a cult. And I'm sure you have this experience too, when you start like researching things and understanding like what's going on. And I had already had a good idea, but when I started seeing it for myself outside, and I was like, wait, this is like, where's Satan? Like, where's the devil? Where are all the demons and the evil spirits? Like, everyone's just a breath of fresh air. Like, this is an amazing life out here. I'm not going to stay in the cult. But the catalyst for me, which I was turning 18, so I knew I was a full adult and I could leave. But at this time, Ricky Rodriguez, who was still alive at the time, and my sister had left, Davida, and they were both extremely vocal about the cult and their story and the things that they had been through. You know, my sister was sexually abused and raped from 7 on. And Ricky Rodriguez, we all know his story. It was well documented. And they started developing demons and creating all of these spirits and things to identify with the ex-members who were speaking out in the cult. So they started calling Ricky and my sister Vandari, that they were full of the devil and they were demons and demons had taken over them. And we need to pray that the Lord smite these demons down and kill them. And so I would be sitting in the living room with all the adults in the compound, everyone praying for God to smite down my sister with a bolt of lightning, and because she's a demon, and for everyone to kill Ricky. Like, this is my brother and sister that I was raised with.
Yeah.
And people were praying for their death and praying for them to see the Lord and telling everyone that they're full of demons and full of evil spirits. And that's when I was like, okay, no, I'm not praying against my sister for her to be smitten down by a bolt of lightning.
And real quick, before we continue, because I want people, if they haven't seen the first episode or any of our other Children of God episodes, Ricky was named Davidito in the cult. And what we talked about previously is Serena's mother was actually the one who wrote the manuscript of how to, I'm going to put in huge air quotes, sexually liberate, which is actually sexually abused children from infancy. And it was written with Davidito as the subject, with photos of him, everything in graphic detail. So this is someone who clearly had a lot of trauma, and now he's speaking out, and the cult is like, oh crap, we don't want our kids to be exposed to this, because they probably by now want to bury some of that past and not have them understand the severity of what was going on.
Exactly. And in our previous episode, we talked in a lot of detail about the Davidito book, which my mother wrote and authored, and in which she is in the pictures.
Yes.
At this time, my sister was not in a good place, but Ricky was hugely instrumental in me sticking with my plan of leaving the cult. He would write me in my email, and he actually would write, like, did you read that bullshit about me? Whoa. And he'd be like, I can't believe they're saying that I'm full of the devil and that I'm a demon and everything. And he never gave up on me. Even when I was like, I don't know, like, it seems really hard, your life outside of the cult. Like, I have this boyfriend. And he's like, Serena, get out. Like, you need to leave. Don't wait till I left. He left, I believe it was in his 20s. And he was just like, don't. Leave when you're 18, leave when you can. And he was like, I'll help you, whatever you need, like, just get out. So he never once gave up on me. He would always email me, always write me. He always found a way to contact me. So he was hugely instrumental in me keeping with my plan in leaving the cult. In Mexico City, where I'm living right now, full circle moment, I decided to leave, and I was nearing 18, and I asked my boyfriend, I said, why are you in the family? And he says, because you're in the family. And I was like, oh, no. I rejoined for you. I'm not here for anyone else. Like, I'm here because you're in the family. And I just assumed he liked it, but he was pretty like, he just kind of went with whatever was going on at the time. He didn't have like a very strong personality or anything. So I was like, so what are we doing here then? Like, let's go. I'm about to be 18. Like, we'll just both go. He was a bit younger than me. So I turned 18. I waited for a few more months until he turned 18. Then we both left Mexico City. At the time, I was making quite a decent amount of money, either selling CDs or begging on the streets or getting money from men who wanted to marry me, but couldn't, and then they would just give money to the home. So I was siphoning off a little bit of money. I ended up leaving with about $120. So that was enough for me to buy a ticket to go on a bus from Mexico City to Houston, and then to have a little bit left over. So that's exactly what I did. I told the mother, who was the leader of this home in Mexico, I said, I'm done. I'm 18. I'm leaving, and your son's coming with me. Whoopsie.
Oh, and she was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Thought you changed.
She was like, what?
Gotcha.
I couldn't like fully just be like, fuck you. And I had to be like, yeah, I've just been struggling and I prayed about it. Like I wanted a peaceful exit, because I knew like, you just never know. These people would pop off at any time, and they had full reign of punishments and public punishments and abuse and shaming. So I knew like how to talk to leaders. I knew how to get the people to like me. So I did the whole praying and stuff. And yeah, they stuck us on a bus and brought us up to Houston. And then that's when I started my life from absolutely nothing.
So where do we even go from here? How did you start your life from nothing with this little love story you got going?
It was very hard, but in the beginning, I told the leaders of the home, like, I'm going to go back to Texas where my parents at the time had a home. And I was like, I'm going to think about living with them. I didn't fully say like, I'm out, because I had nowhere to go. We both didn't have anywhere. We had no money. We had nowhere to stay. So I knew I had to kind of sweet talk my parents into getting me into their house for a bit. We landed there in the house, and there was a woman at the time who was hiring ex-members to work at her massage parlor. I don't even know how it happened. I have no idea. I had one friend who was working there, and she offered, like, I can ask, if you can work there. So that then I came in, and she was hiring a bunch of ex-member women totally illegally to give massages to people in her business. I ended up learning how to be a really good massage therapist. I watched YouTube videos at the time. There wasn't much else on the internet. Like, you weren't really Googling at the time. We're talking 2002. I rented a bunch of books from the library about Swedish massage, Thai massage, acupuncture, and I taught myself, and I would practice on the other girls how to give good massages. And I ended up being like a really good massage therapist at this business.
Wow.
And this woman hired me, and I was a really hard worker because I needed to get out of my parents' house, and they knew that I had this job. They were thinking it was like me trying to find myself and in a transition phase, and I was going to come back to the Lord, and I was letting them think that that was the case, but it was absolutely not the case. I was just needing to get enough money for a place. So I made enough money to get a car from that, and then I started saving up enough money to get an apartment. During that time, the relationship with me and this boy just didn't work. He was pretty unhappy and he wasn't as hard as a worker as me. And I felt like I was supporting both of us. So he ended up going to New York to stay with his brother. And that was the end of our relationship. And then I was free. I was like, okay, now what do? I have this car. I have this job. I have money. I have a bank account. So what do? So I ended up moving into an apartment with a friend and sleeping on her couch. And she lived in this tiny apartment, and I slept on her couch, and then we just kept working. And then I tried a few odd jobs like waitressing, working in clubs, massage, and a lot of different things. And when I started working in clubs, that's pretty much when I got straight into the partying scene, because then I was like, whoa, wait, like, alcohol and dancing all night and like drugs and, boys everywhere. So that was like a whole other situation. Like when you have full freedom, I went from just every single part of my life control from before I was born to now just the world's open to you. And I'm like, what do? Where do I go? So I had a car. I was working in clubs, when you get tips working in clubs and waitressing and things, like I was making $100, $150 a day. And I was just like, I'm rich.
Yeah. Something that I'm wondering is, because you grew up in such a sexually charged environment with these orgy parties and just sex everywhere, and then now you're free as an adult, young adult, and you're going into these party scenes that are also sexually charged. Were you triggered at all, or had you not processed any of that yet enough to give yourself space between your before life and your current life?
I had absolutely not processed a single thing. So I was just using my sexuality and my body to get whatever I wanted. At this time, I was already 21, 22. When you're like a 21, 22-year-old new in the club and you're cute and hot wearing cute outfits, like guys are going to do things for you. And when you're readily available, so I just slipped right back into usual programming and processing, like using my cute personality, my cute body, and my cute outfits to go anywhere, to go out with any guy and to, I like walk straight up to the club and be like, let us in. And they're like, sure, it's me and like 5 other girls. So of course, it was so normal and natural for me to go straight from this sexually charged environment in a cult to a fully sexually charged environment in clubs where girls were expected to wear tiny skirts and dresses and be available to men, and like the club owners would come up and try to go out with you, and then you'd hang out with the DJs, and the bartenders were trying to get with you, and it was just this full world of just fully charged sexual everything where I thought I was in control, but really it's just a full numbing technique, and I'm just totally in that trauma cycle. Going through the entire process because that's all I knew.
Right. And I was going to ask you, because you don't have any sort of boundaries or you don't know how the outside world works and you're just kind of winging it, right? Was there anything that you felt like you put yourself in a dangerous situation, or things happened because you didn't know better, or any of those scenarios? Maybe you tried too much alcohol for the first time because you don't know better, something that you realize now you were putting yourself in dangerous places.
Oh, 100% all the time. Like at this point, I don't even know how I'm still alive with those years in Houston. I was coked out of my mind on MDMA, weed, GHB, everything, driving around town. I was stopped by the cops so many times. I don't even know like how anyone let me go and didn't throw me in jail. There were many times where cops would actually bring me to a cafe and be like, you're not allowed to leave until you get food in your belly. You're either going into jail or you're dying if you get back on the road. I mean, thank the gods for these cops that did not throw me in jail and completely end my life. Like there was some major divine intervention my entire 20s, because the shit that I was doing was just insane. I had no boundaries. I was dating on and off with men, taking GHB, passing out, waking up in a house I didn't know. Many of my girlfriends were sexually assaulted. My situation, and I have to say, this is something that I've realized in the recent years, is that I never experienced any sort of sexual assault or any sort of rape or anything that was going on in the club scene, which we know is so prevalent, especially when GHB and date rape drugs are involved. I grew up being told I was different and being told I was special and being told there was a purpose for me, being told that I was some sort of celebrity, special and different from the others. I was told and understood that I was a prize, as we all are. We're all a prize. But that was always in my mind, because I knew in the cult, a lot of men were wanting to sleep with me because they wanted to get that, like, I slept with Murd kind of situation. And I had 2 boyfriends in the cult. That was it. I refused to give myself up to anybody because I didn't want my name being thrown around. And what ended up happening subconsciously is I took that very negative programming into a positive mindset for myself. And I always flirted. I always had a lot of guy friends. I was always partying. I was always the craziest one. I was the one dancing on tables and falling off the couches and doing splits up against the wall. Like, I was out of my mind. But I never succumbed to any sort of sexual assault or any sort of mistreatment by males that entire time, because I had an idea of myself that I was a prize and my body was something to be respected and to be treasured.
Wow.
And I didn't give it up to anybody. And the cult taught me that. So it's a perfect example of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There are so many things in my life that in the cult that I grew up with that I still take lessons, really positive lessons to this day. And this was one of them, because I saw my other girlfriends getting assaulted. I saw them disappearing in bathroom stalls and coming back out disoriented. And I'm like, what happened? And they're like, oh, he just pulled his pants down. And, and I'm like, what happened? These things never happened to me because I was always aware of the situation that I was in. Also trauma response, like I'm around a bunch of guys, I'm not safe. So I did have a lot of things going for me where I was still fully in fight or flight. Someone would touch me in the wrong way and I'm like, ooh, nope, now we're not doing that again. And then that guy's cut out. My years of partying were really positive memories. It was also a massive release. And I know you know this because you've talked about it in your own story of you need to shake out the trauma. You need to get the negative emotions out of your body. There's so many stuck emotions in your body. You have to physically shake it out. And I was doing that every single week, partying and dancing. I didn't know what I was doing, but now, so many years later, I understand how those years of partying were helping me. Yes, the drugs were not a good idea. The excessive alcohol and the not sleeping for 3 or 4 days, terrible idea. But overall, during that time, instead of sitting there, grinding my way through school or forcing myself to have an education because everybody else told me, I was living my life. I was dancing. I was shaking out the trauma from my body. And that's how I was processing it. And at the same time, having the first opportunity to have boundaries and to say no to people and to have autonomy as much as I was able to have autonomy over my own body and choose who's allowed to have access to my body and who is not. I'm still unpacking it to this day, those years of partying. There's 6 years of my life in Houston I just can't account for. I mean, it's just all dancing on tables and working, then dancing, and then falling off a couch, VIP room here, club here. But I have no negative feelings. I used to really beat myself up and be like, oh, I've wasted so much of my life. But now on the other side of my healing journey, I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I did that. Because I would have been in such a different place in my life during that time and later on when I finally did get serious about education.
Yeah.
Interesting turnaround.
You were connecting so many dots for me, actually, because dancing is so cathartic for me. And then I was like, wait a second. When all of my trauma surfaced, that's when I took up salsa dancing. And I was at those clubs 3 hours straight dancing 4 nights a week till 4 a.m. That's all I wanted to do was salsa dance. And you're so right. It's such a somatic release. And I still do that. Dancing is still an escape for me, or massage therapy, after rough interviews, I'm like, oh, I just need to get it out of my body. So that's so interesting. And I'm glad that you brought that up because now I understand myself better now.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for people to know because there's so much shame in the party scene. And yes, there are drugs and things involved that are probably not the best for you. But whenever I see if someone is like, oh, I'm such a partier, or I used to be such a partier, I was like, girl, me too. Great. I'm happy for you. Let's exchange stories. When I see a hard partier, I know they're going through shit now. I know there's a reason and they're escaping something. And so just let them do it. It's like guys grunting in the gym, when they're just constantly going to the gym and bro mode. All I see is a hurt individual that's working through some shit. And that's great, if everyone thinks go to therapy, it's not the end all be all therapy. There's a lot of other things that we can do besides therapy. So movement is an incredible tool for healing. And a lot of people don't know that that's what they're actually doing until way later. Some may never find out. But yeah, I still love dancing to this day. I will still be up in the club till 4 or 5 a.m. Sorry, not sorry.
Hey, do what works for you. Hopefully less drugs, just for your own safety.
Right, yeah. It's the drugs, everyone.
All right, great. So after Houston, where did you go?
Houston was a long time. 6 years I was there. I did try to get an education. So with my GED, I used it to get into Houston Community College. And by the time I was getting serious about my education, I knew that Houston was a terrible place for me. My whole life was partying. All my friends were partiers. Boyfriends were partiers. There's no way that I could change my life and still be in that same environment. I ended up going to Austin, where I completed my 2 years of community college. And by that time, I did a bunch of applications to try to get into university. Mind you, I'm working full-time this entire time. By the time I started college, I was no longer working in clubs and I was no longer doing massage. Had a legit office job. I got a receptionist job and I just started slowly working my way up in that job in the company to where I could work in Austin for the same company and go to school, which was amazing. So I did a bunch of applications to different universities and I got accepted to every single one, which was crazy. But the one I wanted was UT Austin because that's like, UT Austin. And everyone has an idea that, it's like one of the best colleges in Texas. I waited and I wasn't getting a response. So I had applied to the School of Social Work. I started looking into social work and realized that it was a little too triggering for me. At the time, I was like, nope, I can't, nope. Thought I was trying to help people, but the curriculum was too close to home for everything that I was needing to study. So what I ended up doing was writing a really honest essay to UT Austin, explaining why I don't want to be in social work and I want to go to the College of Communications. And that was the first time in my life that I said, I grew up in a cult, education wasn't encouraged. I thought I wanted to help people by doing social work, but I'm realizing that I need to help myself first. So I want to go to corporate communications. I want to get a good job. I want to make money and I want to use my resources from that job and my money to help others through there. But I need to help myself first. And it worked.
That is so cool. I love that.
I remember sending in that letter like, shaking and sweating and I brought it to my communications and English teacher in ACC in Austin Community College, and that was the first time she read my essay about being in a cult, and she was just floored. And she really helped me polish up the letter and everything, and sent it in, and then I got accepted into UT Austin.
I just got goosebumps. That's so cool. That's how I weaseled my way to Peru to do the ayahuasca job. I just wrote the center directly. I was like, I didn't get the audition, I didn't get the call back, and then I got the job because I was like, I need this.
I don't know how, because
awesome.
because I already applied for social work and I was like, never mind, cancel that. I just need something else.
Yeah.
So the whole time in UT Austin, working full time, the entire time, dating on and off, I'm already in my late 20s by this time. Like, I was so embarrassed to be in college at 27, 28 that I lied about my age. I told everyone I was 23, 24. And as I got older, I graduated at 30 and I told everyone I was 26, 27. I was so embarrassed to be 30 years old in university around a bunch of 21, 22-year-olds. And I'm still friends with some of them to this day. And I'm like, sorry for lying to you, but surprise.
Yeah.
But now that they know my story and it's it's on Instagram, it's like they understand. But like I had said in our previous episode, in this one, fully lying about my life the entire time. Parents were in the Red Cross. I'm half Brazilian and military brat. And I'm 25 when I'm 30, nothing of my life was true to anyone. And it felt terrible. It felt really bad to constantly be lying about my life, but I didn't know any other way. So when I graduated, I had already been working from when I was 25 or 23 even. Like a normal office job. So I had a ton of work experience by the time I graduated. So immediately I used that degree to get a better paying job in tech. I had always been in the technology fields, gaming, IT, and various departments. So immediately I got a job in the gaming sector. And from there, I worked my way up in the company and started making really good money, 6 figures. Very shortly after I applied for new jobs after my degree, I felt like, woo, I made it. I've got my fancy car and my nice apartment and everything's great. And then here I am, 32 years old, still lying about my life to everyone.
Yeah.
Boyfriends, families. I would not tell my boyfriends anything unless we were 6 months in, because I was like, okay, well, we're serious now. So now I have to have a sit down talk and explain to them what's going on. And a lot of them would Google me or watch videos on YouTube about my family. And then I have a bunch of questions. It was always a super traumatic time for me to explain who I was and where I came from. I didn't want that. I wanted to be honest with people. But again, I couldn't.
It's
because
hard.
I would cry all the time. It's really hard to be honest with people that you want to be honest with. We're not talking about like someone you meet at a club or like a cafe or something, or even colleagues, work colleagues. We're talking about like boyfriends, good friends that I've had now since my early 20s, even colleagues that I got close to. I started realizing like maybe there was something that needed to change in my life. And then that's kind of where I started dipping my toes into figuring out like what can change in my life. Like, how can I be okay talking about my life without bursting into tears?
Yeah. At this point in the timeline, because I'm not sure where we're at, had you heard of or did Davidito commit the murder-suicide yet? Because you were close to him. How did that make you feel?
Yeah, that was a while back. I should backtrack. Totally glossed over that part. That was in my party days in Houston. So that was in the middle of like, it was 2004, 2005. I was like deep in the party scene when this happened. And this is when I started realizing I couldn't talk about my life at all. He had actually contacted me a few months before this happened, and he was asking me where my parents were. And I knew my parents at the time had gone to Mexico. And I was like, no, I'm not telling you where my parents are. And he was like, Serena, I just want to know, like, where are they? And I told him, I said, I have a feeling that you're going to harm them. And I don't want that on me. So I can't say anything. And he specifically said, I would never harm your parents because that would hurt you and that would hurt your sisters. And you guys are like my sisters. So I would never do anything. And he was like, I just want to help get your other sisters out. And I was like, nope. We're not going there. So I did see him in California about 6 months before this happened. I could tell he was different than the other times. Like, we were in contact this entire time. I had visited him multiple times since I had left in 2002, and we're talking about now 2004-ish. And something I could tell had switched. It just felt like he was really struggling. And I was not at the point at all in my life to where I was like, are you okay? What's going on? I was like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. No, I'm good. Let's close the door.
Yeah.
This was my early 20s when this happened. So I went back to my life after that visit with him in Houston and partying. And very shortly after, I received a call from my sister about what had happened. And then I received some video footage privately about the video that is on YouTube about him, why he's going to commit the murder-suicide with Angela Smith, what he's going to do, how he's trying to get to his mother, and he's going to do everything he can to get to his mother and to kill her. That changed everything for me and for my family because there was no more hiding at that point. That changed everything for everyone. Every single person in the cult was affected by what had happened. That set in motion my own healing, but me coming to terms with my life forcibly and being able to look at my own life from an outside perspective because I had disassociated from it so much. And I'd just be on TV flipping and like, oh, entertainment, there's a photo of me and my family. CNN, Larry King Live, which was on at the time, Oprah, Montel, Howard Stern, AMC, documentaries. Everything was like bam, bam, bam because of Sara Kelley, my mother, Sara Davidito, who had raised him. And then it's like, and Sara Davidito also had these daughters, Davida and Serena, or Mary Dear. And then there would be pictures of me and my family. And it was so jarring to see my image on TV and just something so incredibly out of my control that I sort of just disassociated. And then I was dating someone at the time and he was like, what is going on? Like, I was on TV and I saw your family. And he had met my parents too.
Oh.
And I just was like, just catatonic. I couldn't even talk about it. I said, you research everything about me and ask me questions because I can't even tell you. I can't speak about it. And that's what he did. He spent like 3 days. We've spent about 3 days apart from each other. He researched everything and he came back with a bunch of questions and I answered them as best I could. And he was like, you've been living in Houston for years. Why haven't you told anyone? And I was like, what are they going to do? Like, what do I say? Where do I even begin? Like, there's no, I don't even know how to talk to it, how to tell myself what had happened. I wasn't in therapy. I didn't even know what therapy meant. I had no idea. This was all before. So that kind of was the catalyst of me being like, okay, I can't be partying because everybody knows who I am. So I need to go to school and make something of my life. That's when I kind of started transitioning out of the party scene to do college and to kind of like make something out of my life. But that was already in full swing by the time I got to Austin. And I was still fully lying about my life. But every year around January, when the anniversary of Ricky's murder-suicide happened, Ricky's death, there would be something on the news about it. Because it's a very sensational story. So I was always preparing myself for January, like, okay, trying to figure out, like, how can I get all of my friends not to watch TV for a month?
Oh, wow.
So they won't come across my life.
That's a lot for you because you don't know when it's going to pop up or how it's going to emerge or who's going to see it and want to talk to you about it. It's hard having a story like that, especially going public, because people could just trigger you at any moment. They could just come up and talk to you and want to know about it. And it's hard. You don't want to have to just divulge.
Especially then, like mid-2000, 2005, nobody knew what triggers were and trauma. And, people were just like, so you grew up in a cult. That's weird. Tell me about it.
Oh, yep, exactly.
You know that guy who like murdered someone? And I'm like, yeah, like my brother that I grew up with. Cool, thanks.
Oh, that's so hard. So you were at the point in your story when I derailed this a little bit and backtracked where you have the 6-figure income, the car, you're doing well, the great job. Is this when you finally felt safe enough to start really unpacking your life?
Forcibly. I never felt safe, and I probably would have never started if it weren't for the universe giving me little pushes or big kicks out the window. Really.
Yeah, that happens.
They're like, oh, you're not really doing this, so here, this will force you.
Yeah.
So I got laid off from my amazing job because our company got bought out and they laid off everybody in the USA. They were getting cheaper labor, overseas, as greedy companies like to do. I was left with nothing. I had no job. I had broken up with my boyfriend very recently as well. And I was just kind of like, oh, what do I do? Do I get a new job? And a really good friend of mine had been working on herself for a while, for a couple years now. And I had seen the changes in her. We had a talk and she was like, get help. Like, I need to say that I did seek out therapy for the first time when I was in college. At UT Austin, they provided very cheap therapy for students. But the therapy is for different types of trauma, not my type of trauma. I could tell immediately when I was talking to therapists, like, I grew up in a cult and then I was a child bride, and then like my mother was a leader and she wrote this book about child abuse, and they were just like, like you need an expert for that. Not every therapist can deal with that. You have to find someone who speaks your language.
Yeah.
I was told things like, write your problems on a piece of paper and let's burn it. Take this ball and pretend it's your problems and throw it out the window. Huh? Really unhelpful. So I gave up on therapy. That was the first time around. At the time, my friend was like, I don't think therapy is right for you right now. I think you need something deeper. You need some spiritual work, some inner child work, perhaps some plant medicine and things like that. Actually, our experiences with plant medicine are so similar. When I heard your story, I was like, oh, me too. And that's when I realized, like, I have no job. I have a ton of savings and I got a really nice severance package. I actually have time to sit around and not work and start working on myself. And my friend told me, she said, this is the perfect time. Don't get a job because the shit that will come up, you're not going to be okay. Like, you're going to need time to just be in your house and cry for weeks. And I was like, well, that sounds terrible. Let's just keep numbing through life.
Yeah.
Keep going. Maybe another round of partying.
Yeah.
But I knew things were slowly crashing around me. The job, the boyfriend. I had a car crash very shortly after. So the universe was like giving me some clear signs that it's time to change course. I hired a trauma recovery coach and we started going through the chakras and the meanings of the different chakras, and very similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And of course the first one,
the root,
security. Where is that? Not here, not in my body, that I don't even know. I'm not even in my body. So it was starting very, very much with just what each chakra represents. And then doing inner child work, like, where's your inner child? What are the things that you have discarded along the way? What are the things that your inner child loved to do that were suppressed? What are the things that were taken from her? A lot of spiritual, much deeper work than just talk therapy. After a few months of that, I had another friend who had just experienced ayahuasca. She invited me to that, and I'm so thankful that I did chakra work on trauma and balancing chakras first, because that ayahuasca, as you know, is crazy. This is all within months of each other. I got laid off end of March. I did a break. I did a lot of coaching and trauma recovery work up until June, July, and then I went straight into ayahuasca. Like, I was not wasting time.
We really do have similar stories. Wow.
Yeah. When I heard your story, I was like, what? The ayahuasca experience too, I'll go real fast over it, but it's so similar to what you experienced as well. If I'm paying for something and if I'm serious about something, I'm like, give it to me 100%. I don't have time to do this, like, dip my toes in the water. Like, let's just go.
Yeah.
I signed up for a 3-night retreat in the country outside of Austin. And I was like, okay, let's just see what this ayahuasca thing is. And I was triggered immediately. I came in and everyone's wearing white. People are hugging each other, saying, hey, brother, hey, sister, like I'm back in the cult.
Yeah.
Women aren't shaved, like I was just like, what the hell did I just step into? So immediately that just kind of shut me down a little bit. My friend who was there, she could tell I was like, whoa, I don't know. And she's like, just whatever happens, whatever comes up, just let it happen. And so the first night, very similar to you, I'm like waiting for this amazing experience to happen and just nothing. I'm getting nothing. I'm hearing people puke and cry and sing and I'm just sitting there like, I'm the 1%, but this doesn't work off. It's
so funny. Same thing. Real quick, for those who aren't familiar, ayahuasca is an ancient plant medicine that originated in the Peru, I want to say Brazil area too, in the Amazon jungle. And essentially they've been using it for hundreds of years. And the shamans who figured out how to put this leaf and this vine together to create this brew, and it just shoots you off into outer space. Traditionally, the shamans would perform it and then use their songs or their icaros to heal their patients. And now they've started to give it to the patients themselves, and more and more people are becoming aware of it. For the safety of everybody listening, we are not telling you or prescribing you to do this medicine. It is a very serious medicine that you need to do a lot of research on. Need to make sure that you can be safe on it if you're using any sort of prescriptions. I'm not a doctor, neither is Serena.
I'm not a doctor either.
A million disclaimers that this is something that not everyone should be doing, and it is a very serious thing. But yes, when it is used correctly and in the right settings, and I will say it can get culty, so I'm also not promoting to go do it. I think there's very serious things you need to consider when doing this, but a million disclaimers over, continue on. It's a beautiful medicine.
A million. And I 100%, when people ask me, I'm like, you need to do some trauma work first. I 100% do not recommend people just go straight in without having already had some sort of background on dealing baseline trauma recovery, trauma healing.
Yeah.
I absolutely was sick of this, and I was like, this is culty. Like, what the hell did I just do? So I left the room. And I went outside and I just laid in the grass and the stars, and like, I was kind of seeing things like, energy waves and things that you see, but I was like fully not anywhere. I was here, and it helped me get grounded. I will say, like, it helped me just be present and be where I am. Like, phones were not allowed, so I had nowhere to be with but myself. And I did some journaling and it was fine. And then like they came and found me later and it was like, where did you go? Oh my God, we thought you had a trip and ran away. And I was like, no, this ayahuasca thing isn't for me. Like, it's not working. Never mind. Like, I'll just go home tomorrow. And I had a talk with the shaman the next day, and he was like, like, it's very common for people to not have crazy experiences. Like, why don't you just stay one more night and see how it goes? And I was like, okay, fine. But why not? Like, I'm very adventurous and I'm very open to all kinds of experiences. I don't like to judge. I don't like to judge things I haven't tried. So I'm a big judger, but I will judge things that I know till the cows come home. But if I don't know it, I got to try it first. So I did. And then, wow, the next night was absolutely insane. I immediately And just so exactly like your experience, when you just kind of let go and you're just like, okay, it's not going to happen, so I'm going to stop trying.
Yeah.
That's when it's like, bam. Even down to like the snakes that I'm seeing and everything, such huge symbolism. Like our experiences were so similar as far as like the lead up to, our individual experiences and what we needed. Immediately 20 minutes in, like I started seeing snakes and darkness and dark blue snakes and going around. And then all of a sudden I was just sinking in the water, sinking in the ocean with a cinder block around my neck.
Oh my gosh.
And I was just sinking down into the depths, and I landed, bam, at the bottom of the ocean. And I was like, get this block off me. And so I got this off and I look up and I see myself, my 3-year-old self, down in front of me, and she's just laughing and she's running and she's like running away from me. And I was like, oh my God, like, no, what are you doing? I have to get you. So I started chasing after my own self at 3. I finally chased and got to myself, and I turned her around and she turned around and she's like, why are you chasing me? And I was like, because you're not okay. Like, I'm trying to save you. What are you doing down here? Like, this is bad. Where are we? And then myself at 3 looked at me in my 30s, like mid or late 30s, and was like, no, you don't need to save me. You already saved me. Save yourself. And I was like, oh.
Whoa.
When you really think about the meaning of what myself had just told me, I was like, wait, what? Like, I don't need to save you. I need to save myself. And she was like, I'm good. It's you that needs saving. You need to save yourself. Like, stop worrying about all these other people and just focus on yourself. And that immediately after that, like, that changed everything. I saw like visions of myself, like on TVs, on podcasts, writing a book, all of these things. And it was like coming after me, like a spotlight on me. Like, you're going to tell your story. This is going to come out. And I just started crying.
Goosebumps right now.
Yeah. And like telling it, like I can just feel the emotion in it too. Like, it's every ayahuasca experiences are so personal to each person.
Yeah.
And they have so much meaning and so much depth. And this was 2019 when I had no intention of speaking about my life at all. And I just started crying and I was like, I'm going to be attacked. I'm going to be called I'm a liar. I'm going to be called all those things. And they were like, yeah, you are.
Wow.
You are. So get it out now because it's coming. And I was like, fuck.
Do you remember what month it was, just out of curiosity?
And it was June or July of 2019.
I thought you were going to say January. I was like, that's when I was there.
Oh, that would be amazing.
That would have been crazy. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and that changed everything. That changed everything for me. And I was given spiritual guides, and they were like, these are the people that are going to help you. So call on them. And then the third night was just more of like, these are the stories that you're going to tell. This is how you're going to do it. This is what's going to happen. So I came out of that like fully just like, I'm telling my story. And that's it. That's what's happening. And people were like, wait, what? Like, what are you talking about? And my good friend who was there was like, but you'd never told your story. And as you know, the next day there's integration and they have us like
circle talk.
Yeah. That was the first time I told my story in public. Like, I grew up in a cult called the ChiIdren of God, and I told it in a very, very safe space.
Yeah.
A very safe space. And so I got the practice that I needed later on. And then when I got home from the ayahuasca experience, I opened Instagram and I wrote a post. It was either July or August, and it's still on my Instagram, like way down in 2019. No longer will I be shamed into silence. And it just like listed, I grew up in a cult. These are the things I experienced. I'm going to talk about my life. Like, there's no more hiding. I'm not going to be ashamed. And yeah, that...
Wow, Serena.
That opened the door to everything.
Yeah. So what was the backlash, if any, of doing that? What did your parents think? What did your friends think?
Unfortunately, the backlash was not from my parents or my friends. It was from former ex-members. I was new to speaking out. I had no idea what I was doing. I was not getting media training. I was just blah, 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 blah. I'm very much like, I'm a super messy action taker. I will just, everything in my life is just full drama. Like, I just open the door, 100% ins, mistakes, and drama all the way. So what I started writing about was forgiveness and working on forgiveness with my parents. And I did not know how to write and tell my story for me and say me, my life, my this. And I was trying to speak for everyone else without knowing I was speaking for everyone else. So I was saying, us, we need to forgive, like, instead of saying, I need to forgive my parents. And that triggered so many ex-members to where my older sister, unfortunately, shared a post that I had written on Facebook into some ex-member groups, told everybody to come on Facebook and shut my shit down. That was verbatim. She said, like, Serena's a liar. Serena's a narcissist. My own sister saying this, older sister. Everyone get on her page and shut her shit down. And so I ended up with 200 negative comments on my post saying, you're a liar, you're a narcissist, you need electrotherapy, you should be in jail with your pedophile parents instead of forgiving them. You're saying this to get attention. I was shocked. I had no idea this was happening in these ex-member groups until they came on my page and started saying all this shit. And I was just in full shock because I was like, wait, like, I'm one of you. Like,
you were there. What do you mean?
We're on the same side. Like, we're all children. We're all the survivors. They tried to cancel me and it worked for a while. Like they were like, you are no one to talk. You were never raped when you were 7, blah, blah, blah. It was vile. It was pretty bad. At the time I was just like, okay, well, I tried and clearly that didn't work, but I was finding my voice. I didn't know how to talk about my own story. I didn't know how to relate to others. I was in this spiritual awakening. As you know, things can come crashing down around you and you're trying to make sense of the world, but I'm also trying to speak about it while I haven't made sense about it within myself. And I clearly hadn't made peace about it within myself, which is fine. Whatever happened in my life, it happened exactly the way it was meant to happen. But that shut me up for a good while. Like the rest 2019, it was just me in survival mode being like, I can't do this. So I guess, back to work life it is. So I ended up taking a trip to Asia and like kind of going around just trying to figure out like what the hell I'm going to do with my life. And then COVID hit, of course, this was 2019. By 2020, I had to come back to the USA. By that time, I kind of had reassessed everything and taken a break and been like, you know what? No. I'm still going to talk about my life, but I'm going to acknowledge the things that people pointed out, as horrendous and terrible as the criticism I got was, and as really sickening bullying that I received from fellow survivors. I took their considerations to heart, and I realized that I needed to talk just about myself and just about my own story and about my experiences and not speak for everyone else, because that was done to me. My older sister often gave interviews and would talk about things that happened in my life and things that I had said and quote them in interviews without my permission. And I really felt violated. So I had a talk and I said, you know what? I'm only telling my story from now on. And if I mention you, it's only going to be mentioned for things that have already been out there in the internet. I will never tell any part of your story that you haven't told yourself. And that's how I continued on with my life. And then I ended up from there deciding to go get a certification in trauma recovery coaching from the International Federation of Trauma Recovery Coaches. I got a brain health coaching certification from Dr. Amen from Amen University. I just started gathering like certifications and education and educating myself on the healing modalities that interested me. And then I started putting those into practice. Yeah, a couple more ayahuasca ceremonies throughout the years. And then eventually I found equine mental health therapy. And for those that aren't familiar, it's working with horses to heal from trauma. And I had grown up in Brazil, in the country, in the mountains. Horses were constantly wandering into our property. We had no walls because we were in the mountains. It was separated by jungles. Cows would wander into our property. And so I grew up very connected to nature and very close to nature. So getting back into Austin after traveling around the world and trying to figure out my life and doing a ton of healing on myself, I ended up getting my certification in equine mental health therapy as an equine specialist. So working with the horse as the therapist works with the client and being able to work in the ranch and work with horses and learn from one of the best equine mental health therapists in the USA. I worked with her and Leslie McCullough. She's amazing. I learned so much about somatic experiencing and somatic sensory and getting back into your body. That's the first time that I started understanding what it meant to be disassociated from your body and what it meant to be present and to feel all the feelings. And the horses teach you that. That was something so incredibly special for me. Like my time at that ranch, that was like beyond talk therapy or anything. And every single modality that I did worked. Those are great, but as you know, disassociation from your body is so hard to tap into and to bring yourself back. Like you can be okay here and here, but it's like getting back into your body and being present is so hard, especially for us as women, where we're just so shamed from our sexuality and from being in tune with our bodies or anything.
Yeah. This was in Austin?
Yes. Yeah.
I want to go there. Because that sounds amazing and exactly what I need.
It's amazing. Healing with Horses Ranch. It's a nonprofit 501c3. They work with veterans, they work with kids, they work with trauma, and you can go volunteer. I started it because they had a course open, and I've always loved horses. I'm obsessed with horses. I grew up riding horses in Brazil, and I sought out a horse therapy ranch, and they just happened to have a course for trauma coaches, therapists, and things. And since I had a legit certification from the International Federation of Trauma Coaches, they allowed me into the program, and I was hooked. I started volunteering, then I started working as an actual worker. They offered me a position there. And I did that until I left Austin again and started traveling. Healing with Horses Ranch, highly recommend. They're also always looking for donations and support. Changed my life. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Such a special place. Yeah.
Now I want to know just how you're doing now. I need to get your Linda Listen moment. I know you're writing a book. So many exciting things. So what brings you happiness, joy, and peace now?
Oh, people used to ask me that and I'd be like, travel, yoga, I don't know. I do so many things. There's a great quote called follow your joy and the universe will open doors for you where there are only walls. And it's so true. I do painting now, paint by numbers.
Oh, cool.
I hike, I travel. You know, I'm very much into movement and somatic sensoring and getting into your body. I've been pole dancing for 2 years now, so I pole dance a ton. Any type of dancing is amazing. Any type of movement, find something that you love. Love doing yoga, Pilates, and love working with horses. Being out in nature, working with animals. Very hard to do when you're in the city of Mexico. But in Oaxaca, they have some amazing, amazing places. So these are the things that I do for fun and connecting with women. Having your own community wherever you go is so, so key. There's always times of my life where I'm constantly triggered. But the female friends that I've made along the way have totally made it worth it. And I had to heal my relationship with my childhood and my relationship with my mother. I don't mean physically. People get this mixed up. This is very important to know. Healing your relationship with your abusive parents doesn't mean going to your parents and saying, I forgive you, let's be a family again. Yay, calling up your mom. No, my mom's not in my life. Like, fuck my mom. But it's the relationship, the energetic relationship with her. And understanding that she also was doing the best that she knew how at that time, as fucked up as it is. But I had to heal the relationship with my mom and get rid of the anger, get rid of the resentment. Of course, there's still anger. Of course, these things still come up, but it's not festering inside of me. It's a part of my life that I am able to deal with and accept that these things happen to me.
Yeah.
But I'm not ruminating in it. I'm not being here like, my mom ruined my life. You know, it's just like, yeah, my mom was a shitty mom and I'm not going to talk to her again. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Good thing that's done and learn from it. But I was not able to make good female friends until I healed the relationship between me and my mother. Once I closed that door and I had peace, I had full peace. I knew that I had done every single thing I could have possibly done in my life to heal the relationship energetically, spiritually, and I even tried physically for a while. That's when the doors opened and I got such an incredible group of friends around me. Like, every woman in my life is incredible. And if it wasn't for that, I would probably still be like lone wolf, all like seeing women as competition and like, what does she have that I don't have? Society pits women against each other so much as it is. Even those of us telling our story, that people try to put us in competition as well. And I'm like, huh? Why? Like, we all have so many different stories. There's room for everyone.
Yeah.
On the top. Who cares that my book's going to be like the 11th book about the cult or whatever? Like, it's my story. It's different. There's room for everyone at the top. And so we just have to learn how to get that jealousy and that the way that society pits us against each other, but the way that the cult tries to pit the women against each other too in everyday life. So healing that relationship changed everything for me. And I have a great, community is so key. You need to have a really good support system around you.
Yes, absolutely agree to all of that. So inspirational. Do you even need a Linda Listen moment? Do you have a second Linda Listen? I didn't tell you were going to do two because we did them in the first episode.
Linda, listen, I'm sorry, people who like to sit on your couch, but you have to move. You gotta move. You gotta find something that you love. I'm absolutely not saying everyone needs to be a pole dancer or a salsa dancer, but like, find something that's active that you love to do. There's so much stuff. It's not just yoga and dancing and like going to the gym. You can go on a walk. You can rock climb. You do parkour. Like, I don't know, be a fireman. Like, you're anything active that you're moving your body, you're moving the stuck emotions, you're moving the stuck trauma. These things, when they're stuck and they're building up inside you, you're leading to autoimmune disease. You're leading to sickness. You're more susceptible to emotional mood swings and depression. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not diagnosing you, please. But you gotta move. You gotta find something that you love to do that just brings you that peace and that joy. And two things. Find something that you love to do. And a lot of times, life hack, it's something you love to do as a kid. I loved animals. I loved being around nature. I love hiking. I'm obsessed with horses to this day in my 40s. I love hiking in nature. These things are always going to be the same. Find something that you like to do as a child and see if you can incorporate that into your adult life.
Yeah.
And use movement. Just go on a walk. I'm literally going on a walk after this, because I have to shake off the emotions and the energy. We opened a lot of doors to a lot of stuff, and I've got to like get that out, leave it out in the universe and come back.
Yeah. And for anyone who's interested in reading into more of that, you can read The Body Keeps the Score. It's a really good book. This has been studied, so it's not just like a woo-woo energy thing. Like, you actually hold emotions in your cells. And so it's important, like you were saying, to release that, get that out in whatever way works for you. So 100% agree. Any other final thoughts before we go?
My story is my story. It's very unique, but it's also not unique. There's so many times where I've told people about my life and people have shared with me really deep, crazy, intimate moments like, oh, my uncle molested me, my cousin molested me. So I think the more we start healing from our traumas and the more we're able to be open and authentic and accept the things in our lives and talk in a safe space about it, the more that will encourage other people to talk about their lives and to share things that they've been holding in, which I think is really important, because sometimes we feel so isolated and we feel like we're the only ones that it happened to. So there must be something wrong with us, and that's absolutely not true. We all have stuff in our past that we've gone through, and it just takes that one person opening the door for a safe space to have that conversation, which could really, really help and benefit others. And that's why I tell my story, because every time I do, I get such great positive feedback and messages and people sharing things with me that they never felt safe to share anywhere else. So the more people can come forward, the more that this world will be healed.
Yes.
And that we can all live a beautiful life.
Yes, collectively healing, and also helping other people understand how to better interact with survivors such as ourselves, right? How to talk to someone without re-traumatizing them, how to just be there and listen, because we don't necessarily want people to give solutions to our problems or our thoughts, feelings, emotions. We just want someone to say, wow, I see you, I hear you, thank you for sharing. And that just means so much. So sharing our stories can help others who've not been through something similar understand how to further be compassionate and a listening ear for somebody else. So thank you for coming on and sharing all of the intimate details of your life in part one as well. Yes, it was so great to meet you. We need to be friends in real life.
Yeah, seriously. You're going to be
many
so close.
similar things. Yeah, it's so close. And when you said Oaxaca, I was like, that's right. Because in episode 1, we talked about we are going to Mexico. We changed the dates to the end of October in 2025. So this is open to everyone who wants to come on a sea-to-sea vacation. We went to Costa Rica the last time and it was amazing. The coolest people came. So we're looking forward to meeting more of you guys. And Serena, you are definitely invited to come with us.
Thank you.
To the Oaxacan coast. It's going to be awesome. For everyone listening, just leaving those words of encouragement, as we just mentioned, are so helpful to us, to our guests who do read the comments. And we appreciate you being here. Interacting with the post is the best way to help the podcast get more eyes and more visibility on these stories. And if you want to support further, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/cults2consciousness. You can check out our website where we have our merch, cults2consciousness.com. And I think that's it. We do have a clips channel if you want to see shorter versions of our episodes that are 8 to 10 minutes long. Everything that you need is going to be in the description, including all of Serena's socials. I have them written down right here. Instagram and TikTok are Sir Kelley, Serkelley. And then Facebook and Substack, Serena Kelley. You can find that in the description. If you like this interview, absolutely go and check out Serena's part 1. It was incredible, detailing of her childhood. And we have some other amazing interviews from survivors of the Children of God. We'll link 2 more down here below that you can check out. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.